our next panel is all to do with to scale or not to scale. And this panel is sponsored by Brabners Solicitors. So can I welcome to the stage Dr. Fiona Armstrong-Gibbs, Programme Leader at LJMU and Chair of Bolter Creative, Nick Howe, Co-founder of Uniform, Hannah Fawcett, Legal Director and Chartered Trademark Attorney at Brabners Solicitors. Take a seat. So I'll be hosting the panel and I'll be on my best behaviour. Who said business is boring? Hey, who said? Fiona?
Hi.
Hello. You look lovely.
Thank you. So do you.
I'm loving the pink.
Thanks.
It's like a deep pink.
It's a very old coat, this. It's nearly 25 years old.
You know what? You've looked after it well.
Yes. Good quality. Invest well. Sorry.
I want to start with you, Fiona. Can you talk a little bit about your LJMU research and the findings of your report?
Yeah, will do. So, middle of last year, there was a delegation of us from the Growth Platform, BDO, Form, and the Combined Authority, and we were invited to a 3-day workshop with the Scale Up Institute. And it was really looking at driving regional development, regional growth through supporting how we support businesses to scale in our region. So it was a LCR, Liverpool City Region delegation. And we went and we spent 3 days in Coventry. And it was fascinating. It was really fascinating. We spent some time with a guy called Professor Dan Eisenberg, who had developed an ecosystem, a way of mapping the ecosystem. And that's what my colleague Gina and I were tasked with, was to spend some time earlier this year to have a look at the ecosystem. So not to focus on the businesses themselves, but to look at what support there is in the region for businesses that would like to scale. So that's the sort of context of the report. We're still kind of finalising bits and pieces, but what I might do as well is just give you a definition of what a scale-up is. Yeah. Because it's become quite popular terminology recently as we look to find ways to kind of create, wealthier regions, and not just financially but socially as well. So scaling up a business is seen as a potential way to address some of those economic and social problems. But the OECD defines a high growth company. So that's used interchangeably. Scale up and high growth can be used interchangeably. But it's a company that has achieved growth of 20% or more in either employment or turnover year on year for at least 2 years. So you are in high growth mode if you've grown by 20% financially or employed 20% more people and have a minimum of 10 employees at the start. So actually there's lots of organisations that could potentially be in scale-up mode but don't even realise. But what scaling up really means is increasing innovation, competing in a broader product space, entering new or international markets, or expanding your networks. And at the moment, 2022, the OECD identifies scale-ups represent 13 to 15% of SMEs currently. This is in the UK. Yet they contribute to 47 to 69% of all new jobs generated by SMEs between 2015 and 2017. So the spillover effects of that small percentage of companies scaling up actually creates a better ecosystem for all of us doing business in that system. So that's just to give you a bit of background as to how important us understanding how we create a good ecosystem for businesses to scale. But just sort of findings from the report. So we used Dan Eisenberg's model, and he identifies 6 areas that you need to kind of understand to create a good ecosystem. One is how we access finance. One is the policy environment. Third, the culture for entrepreneurship. So what our appetite to be entrepreneurial is. So the support mechanisms, so the formal and informal institutions that might help us. Human capital is the education and skills and the human development. And then finally, it's access to market. So you're scaling up, you're running your business, you've got the right people, but how easy is it to sell into those markets? So they're the 6 areas that we looked at. And I think, I could go on, and some of it might come out in the conversation, but I think what we found really is we have got all of those 6 bases covered, but there's lots of opportunity to do so much more better and to communicate with each other really, really well. So in terms of culture, we are sitting here, Baltic Creative's been in existence. This area has kind of thrived for 15 years. So that we have a culture, we have an appetite for entrepreneurship. We want to do this. There are success stories, but we don't know enough of them. We need to know more about those success stories because that feeds that culture, that's successful, that the brilliant things that people are doing. We need to know more about them. And there's kind of some hesitation. There is some risk averseness to wanting to to wanting to scale. But I think a lot of that comes from not really knowing what it means and not feeling like there are other people doing the same thing and taking those risks as well. Finance, there's some representatives here of finance, and really interesting the last couple of days, Gunan and I were at an event yesterday around women and high growth businesses, and I've just been this morning with NatWest as well, and they're specifically developing products for IP and helping to support IP. So we're getting there, but it's around amplifying the support that is out there. There is some policy, and we've had massive changes in policy around particularly losing European funding and the landscape around support and funding that was previously, came through Europe and some of those changes. It's really in flux at the moment. So policy to support scale is interesting. We still have R&D tax credits. We still have, obviously, the growth platform and their kind of, the work that they do in the combined authority. But I think that's a tricky area, particularly because it's related to government and changing government. We have some consistency in the combined authority, as Steve Rotherham's got a 3rd term. But really, the big question is, is national government, because they will. When that changes, if that changes, that will inevitably bring change in policy. So things like the apprenticeship levy that supports skills development, that will, how will that continue? Things like support mechanisms. So we've got lots of incredible accelerators now in the region: Baltic Ventures, Liver Labs, Gather. There's a good list that's developing, and that's come from a need. Human capital, we've got lots of universities, we've got support from universities, we've got skills development, further education, higher education. Could be much better, could be bigger, could be more open, but that's there. And I think one of the big questions is around market. Where do we sell to? How do we access that market? Because that's quite, that's not been the easiest for us to uncover. So there's that, yeah. So I'm just sort of rushing, but you get the gist.
Yeah. No, I want to come to Hannah, and then I'll come to you, Nick. Hannah, can you give us a bit of background on your role and, how, advising businesses on scaling up and growth? And then we'll lead to you, Nick.
Yeah, so I'm a solicitor at Brabners. We're a full-service law firm, but I specialise in commercial and intellectual property law. So I'm in an advisory role. I see businesses from different stages of their scale-up journey. So we deal with just from startups and micro businesses that don't want to scale and just want to grow their micro business, staying as they are, as well as scale-ups on the whole length of their journey. And each stage of a business's journey, they have different needs and requirements. But there's kind of fundamental principles that are, exist throughout it. They all want to improve profitability, They want to establish an innovation, and how can they make the most, especially working in intellectual property, how can they really make the most of the research and development that they've got, the innovation that they have harboured within their own business, and finding ways of securing their assets and commercialising them, exploiting them in the best way for them, whether it's leveraging them for security interest, mortgaging those assets, selling them, licensing them. There's lots of different ways that a business can make the most of the intellectual property that they can harness. And I know, a lawyer's not always the most popular person in the room. Granted, I get that. And the legals are boring. I totally understand. But businesses, to make the most of the input that they have for their legal infrastructure, they just need to remain agile with it. It's going to look different. Your needs are going to be different from when you are a startup to when you are scaling. If you've employed 20 people, do you have the relevant policies in place now? You might not have had a maternity policy when there's 3 of you that founded a business. Do you have it in place now? Do you need to go back and look at your articles of association? Do your shareholders' agreements still stand up? Lawyers do tend to be the voice of doom, but we want to make sure those situations never happen, and that's what your legals are there for, to, stress test them. What is the exit plan, and do they stand up to how you envisage the business moving forwards? So,
it's interesting, as you were talking then, I was watching Judge Judy. Does anyone know Judge Judy? I love Judge Judy. And it was a case where it was a barber's, and it was a barber shop, and the owner had opened, I think, 3 barber shops, but when she decided to expand, she drew up a contract that said if they decide to leave, they can't open a barber shop within 3 to 5 mile radius. But one of them went rogue and decided to open a barber shop 2.85 miles. So she then said, well, I can do what I want, but also I signed the contract under duress. But she lost the case. But she didn't understand how she lost the case. But I think it's things like that actually a lot of people don't realise. If you've employed someone and they've worked with you for a number of years, they know your secrets, they know, then by all means, you've got the right to say you can't, as part of the contract, you can't open a shop 3-5 miles from me. So do you ever get those kind of situations, or do you advise?
We do. We've seen actually quite an influx of employees leaving with documents that the business has created. We've dealt with 4 cases just this last 6 months of this in particular. And it's horrible to see, because nobody wants to rely on contracts. Nobody wants to look at the small print, and everything's great when everybody's getting on. And that's why I say, stress test things, because you have to think of the worst case scenario. What is going to happen if somebody takes all your secrets from the business and sets up in competition? You don't want it. It's a prenup for business. You don't want to think of the worst situation happening, but it does happen. So you've got to be pragmatic about it.
You're hearing that, guys? Watch Judge Judy. Nick, I want to come to you, because it's a nice, it just flows nicely. Uniform starts off with 2 lads.
Yeah, well, nearly 3 of us.
Nearly 3?
Three of us, straight out of John Moore's. We met on a product design course, and kind of fell into business together.
So what is Uniform, for those that might not know?
So we're a creative business. We're 27 years old this year.
You don't look old enough.
Well, yeah, looks are deceiving. Been around a while. I think, if you look at the UK design economy, there's something like 300,000 design businesses. We're in the top 1% of that by scale. Most of the design economy in the UK is centred around London. Probably 85% of people working in the creative sector are in London. So we're an outlier in that, and we like to be an outlier. We love Liverpool. We came here to university, and we wanted to stick around in the city because of a lot of things that Charlie said earlier. Also, I think just, going back to something that Charlie mentioned about business isn't always a straight line, and this is picking up on this idea of scale-ups being that kind of consistent 20% year-on-year growth, and we've definitely been through periods of that. So I feel like we have technically been a scale-up at certain points in our trajectory, but at other points, particularly like the last 3 years have been super tough in terms of the economic environment. We've plateaued. We've shrunk at times. We're back on a growth trajectory again, and I think being comfortable with that is difficult, but it is a necessity, because it's so hard to kind of consistently grow in headcount and revenue and clients year on year across 20 plus years. So I think being comfortable with that is important.
Yeah. What would you say has been some of your biggest challenges in terms of your growth as a business?
I guess I'll probably come on to the challenges, but I'll just talk about growth, I guess, in general over the years. So we've been through a number of kind of phases of growth, if you like. We've definitely had a startup phase where it was around kind of discovering what it was that we wanted to do and what we were very good at, and how that fitted with a market. Yeah. And finding a kind of sweet spot, which then allowed us to go through a much more kind of high growth phase. We did access some European funding probably maybe 10, 15 years ago. So that was a huge bonus for us at that time, when there was money being pumped into the city region to create jobs and to grow businesses. And that really helped us grow. I think we doubled in size in 3 years. So we went from sort of 25 people to 50 people. Wow. And about 1.5 million to 3 million revenue in 3 years. And obviously that's, that was great for us at the time, but also great for the city in terms of the economy and the sector. I think some of the challenges that come with that, we particularly felt in that period, there were a lot of good things that came out of it. So we were able to employ more people and have a more varied skill set within the business, which then meant we could sell additional services to clients, which meant that we could grow client relationships and we could, increase revenue and, you would have thought then make more profit, but actually through that phase of growing so quickly, some of the things that were natural when there was 15 people become much more difficult when there's 30 or 40. So like you said, some of the kind of regulatory stuff, reviewing contracts and having HR processes in place that were fit for purpose with 15 isn't fit for purpose when there's 40. The way you communicate with people, when there's a small group, you all go to the pub together on a Friday, everyone intimately knows what's going on with the business. As soon as there's 30 or 40 people, you have to be much more deliberate and much more measured and organized as a leadership team in terms of how you communicate that to the rest of the people. So yeah, there's lots of different challenges, I guess. I hope that's answered that question a little bit.
And it's interesting, when you mentioned about the European funding, because obviously we don't have that. Unless you move or open an office in Ireland, then you do not have access to that kind of money anymore. But Fiona, what's missing in the ecosystem that could help businesses scale up more sustainably and equitably?
That is a really interesting question. I don't think there's a simple answer to it. I'm just looking at some of the statistics here, and I'm not a data person naturally, but I do think it's really interesting. There are 39,000 micro businesses in the LCR. So that's under 9 employees. It's about 85% of the SME population in SMEs in the region. That's a huge amount of businesses. It's a huge amount of people, 39,000. So I think it's, obviously I come from the university as well, so we have a program to help businesses. We have an MBA program to help scale. And I think confidence, people having the confidence to take a risk or being in a safe enough space to take that risk. Support mechanisms in every kind. Now, we need more, I think, we need more support of a varying nature. So we've got a baseline now of what we have, and it does not address those that want to look at environmental issues or those that, well, to some extent it does. We've got the LCR, the low carbon eco-innovatory at John Moores, so apologies for that. But there's so many small initiatives that actually, if we start to join up and amplify what support is out there, that then should be helping people to feel confident enough to take those risks and to start rewriting the narrative. There's still a narrative around Liverpool as well, that, is a hangover from post-war, 70s, 80s, 90s, which we really need to stop talking about. I'm not going to talk about it, but it's there outside of the region. The Southeast certain generations still have a view of Liverpool, and we need to stop that because the potential that we have, and sometimes I think we might shoot ourselves in our own foot sometimes with that a bit as well. So our own self-confidence, our own self-belief is probably where we can start, because that's what we've got. We've got that resilience. We've clearly proven through the pandemic. We've got phenomenal resilience. We're all sitting here. So, yeah, there's lots of things.
And it's funny because no matter where you go in the world, I'm sure you'll meet a Scouser, who's doing well, So the resilience is there. Yeah. Hannah, I want to come back to you. What should businesses be thinking about, and especially SMEs, or, because we mentioned contracts and IPs, but do you have like a tick list of what they should be thinking about, that when someone fresh comes to you, and they might be struggling or they might have missed things out? What should we be looking out for?
I think the key, as we've said, is it needs to be sustainable growth that we're aiming for. And I was trying to think about what the best way to describe what that means is, because it's a term that everybody uses, and I found this definition and I'm trying to remember it. So it's expanding a business's operations for economic prosperity against the balance of environmental responsibility, social equity, and financial longevity. And I think that's pretty key, because you can go and hire 30 people on a whim. You can go and buy another 5 properties to operate from. But as Nick said, that doesn't mean it's always long term. Yeah. And your profits might not see an increase just because you've done that. So again, as Nick said, it's about being measured when you do look to expand. Think about why you are doing things. You don't have to scale all the time to grow. You can grow in a different way. If you operate in a niche market, make sure you're the best in that market. Make sure you have a degree of customer loyalty that pays dividends, and that will help you through an economic weather. That will help you. Your customers will stay loyal to you. If you are struggling, if you need to increase your prices because we've had an influx in issues with the supply chain, for example. So be scaling for the right reasons. And when you are scaling, think about, again, I will obviously always come back to the legals, make sure the backbone of the business is supporting that. So are your documents correct in place? If you now sell a different product line, do you need to change your terms of sale because there's something else, like there's different warranties you need to give? Consumer rights will be different now because you've gone to a different product. If you have new employees, do you need to look at your employment policies? Do you need an HR department? This is my favourite one, again, because I'm an intellectual property lawyer, so I'm a trademark attorney as well as a solicitor. And the number of clients that I've had who as a startup, have engaged a graphic designer to produce a nice fancy logo for them, but they haven't actually got an assignment of the copyright in the logo, so they don't own their own brand. And you think, it's critical, but at the start, you grab whatever help you can get to get you going. You need to keep on top of that. You need to just monitor all of those things as you scale.
And it's interesting you say that, because I got my company trademarked for UK and Europe. And that was off the advice of someone who, that was their thing. I think they're part of BIPC, actually. And because I didn't have a clue how to do it, so I was like, you know what, I'm more than happy to peg, just for someone who, actually knows how to do these things. And I think as a startup, a lot of people don't know that, so you go and buy the web name, everything, and then you realize, oh shit, I can't actually, I can't use it. So that's really important. That it's something that people stumble up on quite a bit. Nick, I want to come back to you. Hearing what Hannah has just talked about in terms of what should SMEs look for, from scaling up, are there lots of changes that you had to make, you and the team had to make to be sustainable? Or were there any hiccups or trip-ups that you found along the way?
Yeah, I think, I think everyone's touched on this idea that growth isn't always linear.
Yeah.
It's very easy to kind of define growth as we've got more people, we've made more money, our revenue's bigger. But actually, we also think about growth in terms of mindset, capabilities, doing new things. Charlie talked about this quite a bit in his keynote. And actually, there is great value in that, in diversifying. Also for us, I think a big opportunity and a big part of our success has been able to move into new markets. So right from day one, we weren't afraid to kind of get on a train down to London and go and pitch for work. And that was in the days of, pre-Virgin or Avanti. It was like 2 hours and 45 minutes on the train. But
it was cheaper.
It was cheaper, yeah, it was cheaper, but it was a long trek. Yeah. But I think, perhaps some of that comes from being in Liverpool, being this sort of, city that is very open and faces the world. So it was quite natural for us as we grew to start to think, well, we want to work with bigger clients and bigger brands on more exciting projects. Where are they? Well, let's look at Europe. Let's look at the Middle East. Let's go out to New York, and some of our guys are out in Egypt this week with a client for a few days. We're doing a lot of sort of prospecting in the Netherlands and sort of Northern Europe. We're out in the US regularly. So taking those risks and again, another thing that Charlie talked about, like not being afraid to take a risk, albeit obviously it's a calculated risk, and back to that point of sustainability, we're not kind of going out on a whim. There's logic and sense to those trips that we make, but being ambitious and trying new things.
I was watching Planet of the Apes. The Dawn. Have you ever seen it? The Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. And if you've never seen the franchise, you've got to watch it. I think there's a new one coming out in the next couple of weeks. And Caesar, who's is he a chimp? I'll just say primate. And the humans kidnap his family. And he has to try and get his family back, and he's getting all the primates together to go down to where the humans and the bad apes have taken, the other primates. And he says, there's a line in it, and he says, "There's no gain without risk." And I was like, oh my God, the talking chimp said it. if you can't listen to a chimp, you know. And I was sat there and I was like, oh my God, you've got to take a risk, and there will always be gains. And as you said, it might be calculated, but you will always gain something, whether it's money, whether it's new connections, maybe it's just a lesson, but you have to take that risk. But where does the confidence come from to take that risk? You know, to say to yourself, actually, we should be going outside of this space. We should be going abroad. We should, you know, is it one person? Is it that you're part of a team? Where does that confidence come from?
Good question. It's definitely waned over the last few years, having been through the pandemic, but it's coming back. I think, you know, I always talk when I sort of tell the story of Uniform and how we founded, you know, to students or people that come into the office. It's often one of like a kind of naive optimism when we set up. We didn't have anything to lose. We wanted to do amazing stuff. We weren't necessarily sure what that was. We were in a city that was highly creative. You know, there's a thriving sort of music scene, club scene. You know, it was in this kind of transition as the city centre started to kind of go through that phase of regeneration, and there was a real kind of buzz about the city. So I think in the early days it was very much this environment and our, I guess, combined with our naive optimism of wanting to do something brilliant. And then over time, I think you build that confidence through the wins, you know, the projects, the kind of press, the accolades that you get as a business, and also through the people very much. So, you know, building the team and bringing other people with you along on that journey who share that same vision, and obviously, you know, that goes back to my point about being much more deliberate and thorough about how you communicate with the team as you grow, so that you maintain that sense of kind of shared vision and togetherness, and also, I guess, as a leader and a founder, being able to know when to let go and to bring people into the business who are better than you at a lot of stuff, and then just getting out of their way, and, you know, showing them where you want to go together, but not telling them how to do it because you've employed them for a reason. I think, you know, that has led to a lot of success for us, you know, with people that we brought through the business. And
that's so important. I think the biggest lesson I was told was, if you got ran over tomorrow, can the business still survive without you? And I'm still not there yet, so I'm not doing a good job. And I think that's really important, isn't it? Because you start something and it is your baby, but actually, like you said, you've got to let it go, you know, for it to grow, because there's only so far you as a founder can take that business, and for it to survive and thrive, it needs fresh ideas and innovation. Fiona, should we move away from traditional scale-up models? And if so, how would that look?
Oh, that's a really tricky one. I think my gut would say yes.
Yeah.
The research that Dan Eisenberg did was formed, you know, he'd spent many years doing that, and his view of a scale-up ecosystem and his work on a scale-up ecosystem was really solidified in 2010. You know, 2010 was, for those of, you know, think about what it was like. That was a global recession, 2009, 2010. His work was kind of, you know, that's how his theories have been formed. And that feels like a distant memory. That feels like holiday time, a global economic recession, compared to what we've been through over the last 3 years. And I completely understand from a Baltic Creative perspective about the resilience that we've needed to, as an organisation, to be able to survive that through lots of different, you know, for very different reasons as well. So the traditional scale-up model is that you scale up something and you, whether that be creating widgets, whether that be, and you want to increase productivity and you want to arguably export because we are a country of 70 million. So, and the way you do that is usually through globalization, through probably someone somewhere doing something for you that's been taken advantage of quite, extremely. So that notion of what we are. But I do think that the Scale Up Institute are moving away from that being the gold standard scale up version. We can't continue working like that. The notion of we can offshore something and they'll make all the widgets for us and we can close our eyes and we don't know how that's come about. That we're not going to continue doing that. So that's not good growth, is it? It's not good business. What was the second part of the question?
And how would we do that? What are some of the tips through actually best practice, what you've seen, even globally, what you've seen that actually the UK was still a little bit behind in terms of implementing?
Yeah. I think an area that I'm interested in is inclusive growth.
Yeah.
So how we grow within the region. And I think that's, my interest in that has probably come from this move away from globalization, arguably Brexit, and the kind of, don't really want to say the word the benefit of Brexit in the same sentence, but I think we have to reach that point where we can see what we can do locally, what local resources we have, and how we can build our economies through what's in our DNA, through the people that we have here, through the infrastructure that currently exists. So for me, it's around how do we communicate with each other better? How do we build trust with each other in our communities? How do we work with people that we may not have worked with before, but they might only be down the road? And having a shared view of what good growth will look like and listening to others about what that might be too. Local economies and looking at not just, we're not measuring things. When we got European funding to buy Baltic, to start Baltic, the only measures that we had to report back on from an ERDF perspective were economic. They were economic metrics. They were how many businesses have you supported, how many people are employed in the scheme now, and that was it. Back in 2009, I knew I was going to go down this route, but back then, that was the only thing that we were asked to measure on. So naturally, that's the only thing that you are held to account for. So that's what you do. That's what drives you. So new measures, new kind of social impact measures are likely to be what is needed for those businesses to shift to a more purposeful and purpose-led approach.
There's a lot, isn't there? There's a lot. Hannah, Nick started his business with two friends. As a lawyer, is that the best thing to do?
Of course, yeah.
Because sometimes they always say, don't do business with friends. There is that nerve wracking, and obviously when you start with friends, there is no contract in place, and you will, you see good stories, bad stories, stories in between. But yeah, if you are starting a business with friends or even family,
even worse, yeah. Again, like I say, it's a prenup for business. Just thrash it out between you. Friends, you could be absolutely on the same terms, same ideals, exactly what you want to achieve with each other from the outset. But give that 5-10 years, people have got families in the meantime, people have maybe want to relocate. All those needs, desires, ideals then suddenly have changed, and you haven't implemented anything in the meantime that will allow you to, what's your exit strategy? How do you stress test that? So just have that in mind from the beginning, because it's much easier to thrash the idea that things will go wrong out before it goes wrong, and then you're trying to pick up the pieces. That's the worst thing.
And it's not, I've never had that before, but I've seen it happen, and I've seen it play in the worst way possible. You know, people who have known each other since childhood and through business. And this is when businesses are successful and people have got different directions. So you see that. And it's interesting because I was hosting a panel for Sound City, and someone made a really good point when we talk about sustainability. And they said, would you like to be successful? What does success look like? And do you want to be, you know, successful for 2 years on TV, on all the airwaves? Or actually, do you want to be successful for 30 years and have a steady growth and just be happy, comfortable? And it got the young people thinking, because everyone thinks, oh, success might be that TV, you know, the TV deals, the contracts. And it's like, no, you want that nice, steady growth that allows you to actually still have a good state of well-being. Do we have any questions? Don't be shy, guys. Anything? We've got some students. Come on, students. This is your only chance. Actually, it's not your only chance, but take it. Oh, you've got a question, and go on. What's your question? Oh, 1 minute. So Andrew said, have the panel got any examples of good scale-ups? Yeah.
I do have some examples that Gina, who I worked with on this programme, she collected them, and I thought it was better that she did, because I'm completely biased, because I know a lot of these organisations, and I know, and I've worked with them. They may be tenants or they've been on our programme. So I'll read out the list that she came up with. So success stories. There are numerous successful scale-up businesses from the Liverpool City region, and they're documented on a lot of different platforms. So a lot of the services that have supported these businesses will also have case studies, and they'll tell the story of a lot of the businesses. LCR Tech Climbers is a good one, Whitecap Consulting. So I'm sure you do on Brabners. A lot of BDO will have stories as well. So it's all, if you want to find them, it's worth looking at the services, because they're explaining the services that they've provided into these companies that have been successful. But advanced manufacturing, CNC robotics is a really good example. Clean growth, PIN IoT, digital and creative industries, Evoke Creative, healthcare and life sciences, Ostara Biomedical. On the visitor economy, high impact consultancy. So there's, I mean, that's just a handful of them, but there's, but I think what's interesting, it's a really interesting question, Andrew, is where would you go to find those stories? Who is amplifying the voice of those stories? That's not, you wouldn't necessarily know to go to a legal website to have a look for a story of scale up. So there's definitely a gap there where who will collect those stories and be the storyteller of the region, I think is really, something that we need to do, definitely.
How about you, any?
Yeah, I mean, we've got some that we've helped locally, definitely. One of my favourites was, I don't even know if I can say it was Crystal Clear skincare brands. As starters, it's just machines, but it's now got a whole product range and it scales. Yeah, so there's a lot that has been developed just from an initial idea. But I think it's really critical what Fiona's mentioned a few times is collaboration has to be key amongst scale-ups. You're not all in competition with each other. Your markets might be completely different. They might be the same, but it doesn't mean you're in competition. And if you can help each other throughout your scale-up journey, you will both benefit from it because people will remember that.
That's so true, because back in the day, it used to be a case of, don't tell anyone your idea. They'll steal your idea. But actually, the more you talk about it, the more confident you are about it. And the more, actually, the easier it is for you to answer those questions. Because if you don't talk about your business, how are you going to know what people think or some of those hard-hitting questions if you are going for investments as well? So, yeah. Apart from yourself, are there any standouts? Who are your competitors even when you were doing your research and
I think that point's interesting, and about kind of talking about your business and not being scared that you're going to kind of lose trade secrets, or there's obviously a a level of detail that you might not want to talk about, but we've always been very open and transparent about our business, and shared what we do and the kind of challenges that we've had, because I think you learn from that and you also create community from that. And I think we've also sort of benefited from that, I guess, in that opens up other businesses in our sector that have that same kind of mindset and attitude, and therefore we've learned from them. We've shared challenges, best practice, ideas. So I guess one business who sort of are in the same sphere as us is Us Too. They're a digital business in London and across the world. We had a shared chair as a non-exec. A non-exec was our chair and their chair for a short period of time. And we know one of the founders there really well. So, being able to kind of share those stories with someone who's in a similar position is really beneficial. And I think they're a great example of growth, and also that kind of idea of diversification, because they moved from being, just a client service digital business into games as well. So they've got two parts to the business.
In hindsight, is there anything you would have done differently?
Probably loads of things, yeah, because that's what hindsight is, isn't it? But equally, if we hadn't gone through the experiences that we've had, then we wouldn't have learned from them. Yeah. So, I think, you mentioned the sort of recession in 2009, 2010, and we were kind of 10, 12 years old at that point, and having kind of set up this business in a period of just pure growth in the economy, we didn't really know what hit us. Yeah. We made probably half of the team redundant at that point, but I guess what we learned from that and the strategy of the business beyond that point was diversify into new sectors, diversify the services that we provide, work with a broader range of clients, allowed us to continue to then rebuild the business again, and put the business in a much stronger position, and a more stable position when the pandemic hit. So, we were kind of 70 people pre-pandemic, and we're now about just over 50. So we've shrunk during that period, but we're back into growth again, and we're actually, likely to hit the same revenue figure this year that we were pre-pandemic with sort of 20 less people. So we're actually in a much better shape in terms of a profitable business, and so those experiences that you could have said, well, with hindsight, we would have avoided being too exposed to the property market in 2009. Well, if we hadn't been through that, we wouldn't then have perhaps made those decisions to diversify the services and sectors. So I think you've got to kind of take those challenges as learning opportunities and kind of grow from them.
I think what I'm always scared of is letting people go, because it can't be nice. So as a business owner, what's the process? What's the conversations that you have? I think, because obviously part of my job, I work for the BBC, so we've got HR that no one knows who they are, but actually as a business owner, so if you get the letter, you're like, screw you. But but you're face to face with people, like you say, you start off with 15, then 70, now 50, but you've still got that connection with your employers, your employees, so you know them. Yeah. So that must be difficult.
Yeah, and in terms of the culture, we we foster this kind of sense of togetherness and team, and we're in it together, and so you do build like close personal relationships with a lot of people, and it is difficult, but you've ultimately, as a leader, you've got to make the right decisions in the best interests of the business for the majority of the people that depend on it. And unfortunately, some of those times they are hard decisions. But when you often, like a few years down the line, reflect on that, I've had people who, well, two people particularly, who we made redundant in that kind of 2009, 2010 period. One who's now moved to Australia, set up his own CGI business as an employing kind of 25 people. And he said to me 5 years on, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. Apart over and above coming to work for you for the first point, because he learned so much when he was with us. But I certainly felt he'd plateaued. And actually then being made redundant gave him that kind of kick to go and do something new, move to a different country, set up his own business, and actually, a lot of the things that he learned when he was with us in his kind of foundation of his career, he's then applied into how he runs his business, and has been really successful with that. So, to a certain extent, I'm, that makes me feel quite proud, even though it was difficult in letting him go at that particular time. So there's always those kind of stories that go along with that.
So we are at the end. So before we let our panelists go, we just want a takeaway. I'd say one takeaway that our audience can take away with them. Hannah?
So my recommendation is that you remain agile and keep in mind that you review all of your legal infrastructure as the business scales to make sure that it is fit for your purpose.
I'm going to take an educator's view on this and look at the human capital, and we never stop learning. And if you can take half a day out of the business, if you can allow your employees, your colleagues to take a day, half a day, or even longer, spend some time with the people that are, offering support services, and see what you can learn from them, and take some space and some time to reflect on what you've learned and be able to bring fresh eyes back into the business. And that should help you on that journey, whether it's high growth or sustainability or whatever it is.
I would say that growth isn't always linear. And it's much more than just headcount or revenue. It can be any number of things. It could be doing something completely different, could be moving into a new sector, could be working with a different type of client. It could be changing your business. It could be learning new skills. So I think when you think about growth within your own business, think carefully about what growth means to you, and it doesn't always have to be numbers.
Exactly. And my takeaway is more money, more problems. So we're going to have a 30-minute break, but please take advantage of our stalls today, network, talk to each other, and be back for 12. Can we have a big round of applause for Hannah, Fiona, and Nick, please?